All right. Thank you so much for joining us for our Back to School live series. My name is Nadia, and I am a health promoter with the school health team here at Niagara Region Public Health. So today we have Nurse Madison, who will be talking about managing screen time with your preteen. So before we get started, I just would like to go over a few reminders. If you have questions throughout the presentation, we welcome you to put them into the chat section of the comments, and we'll pass them over to Nurse Madison. We will have a Q&A session at the end where she can answer some of your questions. If we, by chance, are unable to answer questions at this time, we will direct you to a resource or ask you to speak with Niagara parents directly through phone, their chat, and their Facebook page. This presentation also will be recorded and saved on our Niagara Parents Facebook and YouTube page for those who may not have been able to join us live, or if you want to go back and rewatch the presentation. We will also share links to resources that will be mentioned throughout the presentation in the comment section too. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Nurse Madison.
Awesome. Thank you, Nadia. Hello, everyone. My name is Madison. I am an elementary school nurse here in Niagara. The schools I typically work in are located in St. Catharines, Welland, and Pelham. And as school nurses, we work towards bettering the health of school-age children and school-age communities. And we are so proud of all the hard work that has been done and the challenges that were embraced by school staff, students, parents, and caregivers last year. We know that this school year we are continuing, schools are continuing their efforts to keep schools a safe place for students to learn and grow. But we also know now more than ever that school-age children and youth are increasing their use of screens. This was especially seen last year as it was necessary to keep everyone healthy and safe while navigating the challenges of the pandemic. But how can we manage what is necessary and what is excess or overuse of screen time? So that's what we're going to be looking at today. And I'm very happy you've all taken the time and interest in the topic of managing screen time with your preteen, as it's so relevant. So thank you for joining us. Today we will be discussing what defines screen time, what healthy versus unhealthy screen time looks like, and tips to help reduce your child's screen time. And then we'll discuss helpful parent and family resources at the end of the presentation. So what is screen time? Screen time is any time spent in front of a screen. This could include computers, television, smartphones, tablets, video games, wearable technology like smartwatches, and using the computer for school or work. But there's also recreational screen time. And recreational screen time happens in the periods before and after school, between dinner time and bedtime, on school nights and on weekends. So recreational screen time does not include work on screens in schools or for homework. So recreational screen time is primarily what we'll be focusing on today. So how does your preteen spend their recreational screen time? I'll just have you think about this question for a moment here, kind of using this time to reflect. Maybe you see your preteens on their phones or iPads or gaming systems. And feel free throughout the presentation to put anything into the chat. But you can also, take this time as well to just ponder on this question. What devices do you see your preteen on most? How did they spend their recreational screen time? All right, so we have seen major benefits of screen time over the course of the pandemic. This is especially seen in schools, right? As students were still able to learn and attend school virtually last year. And we can only imagine all the digital skills that were learned by students, school staff, and even parents. So opportunities for learning and communication are endless. And actually, according to Statistics Canada, virtually all youth, 93%, use social networking sites and the internet on a daily basis. And over the past year and a half, we've also seen how screen time was able to help us stay connected to loved ones near and far while also keeping us safe. And how many of us were able to take advantage of the FaceTime or video chat features on our devices this past year, right? Screen time has also helped keep us informed and aware of strategies to keep us safe over the course of the pandemic. And students have the ability to follow news, current events, sports, celebrities, and entertainment. And in fact, Statistics Canada also reported that 78% of students use the internet to find information about news, health issues, or relationships. So the benefits of screen time have been so apparent and utilized by many these days, especially. How has your family benefited from screen time during COVID-19? Again, I'll just have you reflect on this question, but who were you able to keep in touch with, and how were you able to keep in touch with them? How were your children able to benefit from screen time? We talked about the ability to continue learning from home online. How has your family benefited from screen time during COVID? Never before has there been such a wealth of knowledge available to students right at their fingertips. We know that the potential of the internet to teach and inform and enable communication and collaboration is really, really exciting. And students develop both technical and critical thinking skills to efficiently utilize information. Technology as learning tools hold much promise, but overuse for entertainment can have negative effects. And although there are many benefits, unfortunately, we do know that too much recreational screen time is linked to various health concerns. So how much is too much? We understand that screen time can be positive, but at what point does it become unhealthy? Children aged 5 to 17 years old should accumulate at least 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity physical activity daily, and no more than 2 hours of recreational screen time per day. So when you break it down, that's about a movie or maybe a few episodes of your favorite TV show, right? 2 hours, that's it. And a survey conducted by researchers at the University of Western Ontario found that actually last spring, elementary school age children's screen time more than doubled from an average of 2.6 hours to 5.8 hours a day, not including the time spent doing schoolwork. So too much screen time is a real concern that we're all kind of facing today. But we know that too much inactive recreational screen time is linked to unhealthy dietary behaviors, lower levels of physical activity, increased risk of obesity, decreased mental well-being, sleep disturbances, and reduced academic achievement. And we know how easy it can be for preteens to overdo their recreational screen time. Technology has advanced, become more accessible, and honestly has become more normalized now more than ever. So how can we manage and limit this recreational screen time? We're going to talk about the following strategies and tips to help us manage preteen screen time. We're going to look at starting a conversation with your preteen, teaching and modeling healthy habits, establishing screen-free time, and encouraging screen-less activities. So on to our first tip, start a conversation. Ask your child what they know about screen time. Try to understand what they like and what they don't like about using screens. Researchers have actually found that 35% of youth worry that they spend too much time online, and 54% say that they spend too much time on their phones. So most preteens understand that too much screen time is not good, but it's hard to make change when the entertainment and socialization that preteens want are often found on a screen. And they can often find their sense of belonging, which developmentally is so important at the preteen stage on online platforms. So, there be many teachable moments as well that can come out of starting a simple conversation with your preteen. Try sparking the conversation about screen time and see where it leads. This kind of brings us to our next tip of teaching. So help kids understand from early on that using screens play a role in the stage of our mental health and our well-being. Similar to eating well or washing our hands, managing screen time is important for our overall health. Just as kids can understand that it's important to eat nutritious food over junk and that too much of anything can be bad for you, they too can learn to make good choices about screens. So make them aware of that 2 hour recommended recreational screen time limit. Ask them how much free time they actually spend on a screen. Maybe even challenging your preteen to track their screen time. This can actually be done and monitored on most smartphones these days. So you can actually go into your phone settings and check this feature out. You can also calculate screen time with a resource from Media Smarts. We're going to discuss this resource at the end of the presentation, but there are definitely ways we can kind of monitor how much time we're spending on screens. It's also important to teach your preteen that there are online safety risks as well, explaining, that they should not share any personal information online, even with the people that they do know. Having these conversations early on with your preteen so that they know that they can talk to you if anything comes up as they get older and as they become possibly more involved on social media. Also discuss any safety features that can be turned on online. Ask if they know how to prevent people from, talking to them in games or chat rooms or other social platforms. Ask if they know how to change any privacy settings to prevent certain people from seeing certain details about their social media accounts. And if they don't know, suggest learning how together. Independence and autonomy are also very important characteristics that teens begin to develop as they grow older. Having said that, the ability to take in a plethora of information online can be great. However, another great teaching point to touch on is encouraging them to be mindful of the credibility of certain pieces of information. Whether it's on Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, you name it, the media can be very convincing. So it's important your preteen understands that not all of it can be taken as factual. We want your preteen to be able to make informed decisions for themselves based on true and accurate information rather than false news. And our next tip is to model healthy habits. So be mindful of your own screen time, right? It has actually been found by researchers that 51% of teens say their parents are sometimes distracted by their phones when talking to them. And in one study, kids were asked what screen time rules parents should follow, and these were some of their responses. Put the phone down when your child is trying to say something important. Don't post anything about me without asking me. Don't spend all of your free time on this stuff, and practice what you preach. Before we can teach kids to use screen mindfully, we have to do it ourselves. Pay attention to your own screen use and think about what messages you're sending. You can also develop a family screen time plan to show that managing screen time is important for everyone, not just kids. So we're going to talk about this more as we go through and talking about different resources at the end of our presentation. But our next tip is to establish screen-free time. Set limits that include all screens and establish certain times and places as no screen zones. Screens should stay out of bedrooms and away from the dinner table and should be turned on and put away at least 1 hour before bedtime. This promotes healthy eating and sleep habits. You can even set daily time limits on certain apps in your phone settings. This can be done individually or set for the entire family across different household devices. It's important to set limits. To give an example, it's been found by public health researchers that the risk of obesity increases by 13% for every additional 1 hour per day increment of television watching. This is why it's important to establish screen time guidelines to better avoid potential health risks. It's also important to establish some screen time guidelines to avoid distractions. Set some rules around when screens should be used in your home. Be sure to set rules the whole family agrees on and can stick to, parents too. Here's some questions to think about when maybe kind of thinking about a media plan and screen time plan for your family. How much time is your family currently spending on screens? Where are screens allowed? Are TVs allowed in bedrooms? When are screens allowed? Are phones allowed while doing schoolwork? Are screens allowed during mealtime? And yeah, we'll provide a link to a family media plan at the end of the presentation, and we'll talk more about it then, but it's a really helpful resource. Now, I want you to think of this question. When do you see your preteen using their screens most? At what time of day? Again, you kind of can just think about this to yourself. If you wanted to, you can mention in the chat too, but when do you see your preteen using their screens most? Maybe it's in the morning, or maybe it's after school, before dinner, after dinner, or before bed. Kind of considering these times when making your family media plan, you can then fill these times with screen-less activities. On that note, it's important to encourage screen-less activities. So finding creative ways to keep off screens can be hard when so much entertainment can be found on screens. But discuss as a family how each member can reduce their recreational screen time. What screen-less activities can you enjoy as a family? It can be hard to break screen habits, but keeping each other accountable and engaged is great. What is your preteen passionate about, and what do they enjoy doing off screens? On the screen here, we have some ideas for screenless activities, but we know that every preteen is different and every family is different. It's more about finding what you guys are all passionate about and what you enjoy doing together while off screens. So whether it's cooking dinner as a family, playing a sport, having a picnic, going for a walk, or playing with maybe your family pet, whatever it may be, kind of brainstorm and think together what you could do while off of a screen. So what screen-less activities do your preteen like to do? And I know we kind of are leading up to this question a little bit, but if you were to think about it and thinking about your family and your preteen, what do you think that they would like to do? How does your child like to spend their time when they're off a screen? Maybe they do enjoy some of the things that we mentioned earlier, but what are they passionate about? And maybe you're not sure, and that's okay. Maybe just try asking them and see what they come up with. All right, and here are resources that we discussed throughout the presentation. We will be sending these out in the chat. The first one being the one that we were talking about from healthychildren.org. They have a create your own family media plan tool. It's designed to make setting screen time limits and goals as a family. And it's very easy to use and walks you through step-by-step to create a comprehensive plan. It even includes brainstorming, screenless activities, and ways to stay safe online as well. Another resource we talked about was from About Kids Health, an online tool to help calculate your preteen screen time. This can be used for your preteen and other members of the family. And as we mentioned, modeling healthy screen time habits is important. And you can even try calculating your own screen time with this resource as well. And finally, we have a few resources from Media Smarts. They've compiled these downloadable screen time fact sheets for parents, and you can find additional tips to manage your child's screen time and how to talk to them about online safety. I know we briefly discussed online safety during the presentation. However, this tip sheet from Media Smarts provides great advice for talking to your child in more detail about online safety. All right, so this kind of concludes our presentation for today. Thank you again so much for joining us. We now have some time to open up the chat for any questions. So if you have anything that you're wondering about, you can always type them into the chat there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Madison. So as we wait for some questions to come in live, I know that there have been some frequently asked questions that I'm sure are at the top of parents and caregivers' minds with starting back school, and that could look different for a lot of people. So one frequently asked question that we've seen is, my child is still participating in online school. Are they at greater risk for poor health? And should I have sent them back to in-person learning?
Wow, yeah, this is a really great question. And, when it comes to this and what, is best for your child, it's often important to factor in quality of screen time over quantity. So your child is using screen time as they're online to learn and grow as a student. And each family member, it's really important to evaluate what will work best for their child in these trying circumstances. If it's been decided that remaining online is best for your child after weighing, the risks versus the benefits of remaining online, then that's best, right? And as we mentioned, there are many benefits to screen time. So it's best to maximize the benefits for your child while still focusing on limiting recreational screen time. So, after your child is done their online school, then you can kind of develop some strategies and maybe using some of these tips to limit their recreational screen time. But that's a really great question. I'm sure a lot of parents may be wondering the same.
Mm. And then um, speaking about, screens and things like that. So another frequently asked question that we've heard about is I typically use taking away devices as a consequence of poor decisions with my child. Is that a good way I can limit their screen time?
Right. Yeah. And thank you for bringing this up. And that's a really, really great question. We've heard a lot of parents that do that. I know my parents, when I was growing up, would often do that for me as well. But actually, researchers have found that disciplining in the form of taking away devices used in recreational screen time can actually be counterproductive. So, by associating screen time with something that's great that can be taken away as punishment, will actually only increase the desire to use screen time in children. So, using it as a consequence by taking away the devices may not be the best way to limit their screen time. It may be helpful to use some of the tips that we discussed in order to better reduce that recreational screen time.
Mm. So now with back to school happening, parents and caregivers are back at work. This question was brought up about I'm not with my kids all day. I work full time and sometimes don't see my preteens until I get home in the evenings. What signs should I look for in my child when they've had too much screen time? And what activities could I use to limit my child's screen time when I'm home?
Yeah, and another great question. When assessing if your child has had too much screen time, there are some great questions that you can kind of ask yourself. So, asking yourself questions like, has my child lost interest in other activities? Do I have trouble getting them to stop screen activities? Is screen use leading them to spend less time with friends or family? Do they get angry or do they get upset when they can't use screens at the time that they expect to? And are screens the only thing that can cheer them up when they're feeling low? So asking these types of questions may help indicate when there's been too much screen time going on. And as far as what activities can be done to limit screen time, so this is a great example of how actually creating a family media plan can be beneficial to a family. So if it's when you're coming home from work, or if it's while you're at work that you're really concerned that maybe your preteens are using their recreational screen time, maybe spending maybe it means them setting the dinner table for you, or kind of filling that time and keeping them busy while you're at work before you get home. So wouldn't it be great if they would set the dinner table for you before you got home from work? Or maybe it's getting a good start on their homework before you come home from work, so that after dinner, or while you're home, that's when they can be having their recreational screen time. Whatever works best for your family and is agreed upon by everyone. So yeah, I really encourage you to check out that link for the family media plan, as it's really helpful, creating something that's designed specifically for your family and your family situation.
Awesome. Another question is that my child has video games that involve exercise. Would
Mm.
this be considered healthy screen time? I know the Nintendo Switch, like you definitely work up a sweat with that. So,
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's great that there are these fun and engaging games for kids that, promote physical activity as a bonus. But, as far as considering if it's healthy, it's important to note that the type and the length of the activity that the game provides. So we know that for preteens, exercise that elevates the heart rate for at least 15 minutes is considered beneficial physical activity. So really considering the quality of the game and deciding if it offers beneficial physical activity. But for sure, if that's what works for your child to get them up moving and gets their heart rate up for 15 minutes, I think that would be a good quality screen time.
awesome. Okay. So I can see how how excess recreational screen time can have some negative effects on my child's health, but I'm worried it's too late to try and limit their use of screens at this point because, of course, it's become such a routine in this day and age with COVID and being at home. Um, so, in the past, when I've tried to limit this, my child has a big temper tantrum. How can I go about it differently this time without putting my child through so much distress?
Yeah, that is another great point. And I'm sure, you wouldn't be alone in that experience, right? And actually, there are studies out there that can point to why changing something that has become a habit is so difficult. So, with the example of screen time, when a habit forms, essentially the hardwiring in our brains change to believe that one has to rely on said habit. And researchers state that in order for the habit to be broken, the new alternative behavior must take place of the old one around 100 times in order for it to become a new habit. So, we can definitely see how it's not easy to kind of break these screen time habits. And sometimes as a parent, it's great to be aware of, that hardwiring and, that it takes around 100 times to break that habit with the replace of an alternate behavior. But, if you do continue to face extreme challenges when attempting to limit your child's use of screens, you could also consider reaching out to NAGRA parents or participating in our Triple P parenting program to connect with a professional as well as other parents who are going through similar experience with their children to learn about possible strategies that may help. So you can go online or you can call to get connected with NAGRA parents if you're looking for, other strategies about managing your child's behavior.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nurse Madison, and thank you to all of our viewers for joining in today. So, as Nurse Madison mentioned, all of the resources that she talked about and we discussed, they are in the chat. All the links there. If you have any additional questions, again, feel free to reach out to Niagara Parents via chat, phone, their Facebook Messenger. And we will actually have, as a reminder, another plug, we will have more back to school live series events coming up in the month of September. So our next one will be on Friday, September 10th. So I think in a few days, with public health nurse Austin and special guest Celeste. So they will be discussing gender and sexual diversity using the gender elephant model. So for more information on upcoming events, check out our Niagara Parents Facebook page and look for their September calendar. So thank you once again for joining, and we wish you and your family all the best for the new school year.